So Sergeant Major Tilley is a native of Vancouver, Washington, and then enlisted in the Army. He served in Vietnam. He also served at the tail end of the global war on terror. So a gentleman who served in 2 different wars, 2 different eras, and lived to tell the tale. So he served in our Army for 36 years and rose to the highest ranks. He went from a tank commander to a section leader to a drill sergeant to a platoon sergeant to a senior instructor to an operations sergeant, a first sergeant, and then he became a command sergeant major. And he was a command sergeant major at the squadron level, at the brigade level, at the division level, and then he was selected to be the sergeant major of the Army. So the zenith of a career for an enlisted man or woman is to be their service branch's sergeant major, which is what he did as the 12th Sergeant Major of the Army from June 2000 to January 2004. So in that role, he advises the Chief of Staff of the Army, the senior officer in our service, on soldier discipline, soldier quality of life, soldier training, and soldier readiness. And he did that back when I was still on active duty as a young major. And then as an older major. And he's got numerous awards from his time in the Army, most notably the Bronze Star Medal with Valor Device from his time in Vietnam. He's been a lifelong advocate for soldiers in his role as a NCO, non-commissioned officer, and as a senior non-commissioned officer. And he continues that role in retirement. He's a co-chairman of the American Freedom Foundation, and they focus on retiree veteran welfare for those who are wounded in action. But then they also provide educational support to disabled veterans and to Gold Star children of those killed in Iraq and Afghanistan in the global war on terror. So he learned it as a sergeant and continued doing it as a sergeant major and continues doing it as a retiree. So now, without any further ado, I want to introduce our president and CEO, who's also a 35-year Army veteran.
I call that a quitter.
And his service also took him all over the world, multiple 3 deployments to Iraq, and then also the class of 2021 in the Ranger Hall of Fame and the class of 2021 in the Ohio Veterans Hall of Fame. So our founding president and CEO, Lieutenant General Mike Farrer. So,
Sergeant Major, we are really thrilled that you're here. And for everyone out there, this is Vietnam Veterans Week. So welcome home. This is your welcome home here at the National Veterans Memorial Museum. And when we thought about how we would best honor our Vietnam veterans, Sergeant Major, we thought of you. And our only fear was that you would say no. And you said yes so fast we weren't prepared for what else we should probably ask for. But relationships are for life, as we often say. And so now we've begun still another. So Sergeant Major of the Army Tilley and I have some history together, and that may come out as well during our conversations. Every day here at the National Veterans Memorial Museum is Veterans Day. And so every day our staff gets to lace them up tight and run from their car or their motorcycle to their desk, and they know they're serving just the best people in the world. So on behalf of my staff who pulled us together, we're sitting in the hall of the 20-year war. These portraits all that adorn the walls came out of a book. A couple Army Rangers and their friend decided that on September 11th of 2022 that they would in fact have a book, and they would launch it, and they'd launch it here at the National Veterans Memorial Museum. And they came to us some 16 months ahead of time, and we said, sure, go knock yourself out, make a great book. And they really made it special. And then our staff, Megan McGowan and Andy Cloyd leading the way, decided to sort of de-aggregate the book and create the exhibit on the wall and to honor those who served in this 20-year war. So this is a special time to be right here with you in a very special place. And let's give a round of applause to the entire NVMM staff for all of this. I say often that relationships are for life, and I've made so many since I've come to this town. but from Charlie Airborne up in Alaska in
Your first
1985,
sergeant, right?
my first sergeant's
That's right.
right here. So let's give him a round of applause.
Yeah, all right.
All too often, his favorite saying is, "Sir, you don't want to do that," and that's why I'm here today. Yeah. Sergeant Major, thanks for coming. And so let's start with there you were with a choice of what you probably would make of your life, and you decided to enter the Army. And then what happened?
Well, it's really funny. I wasn't the best kid in the world. In fact, I was a terrible kid. I had a lot of problems when I was little. In fact, I was just telling somebody a minute ago, the last room that I had before I came into the military, I lived in a laundry room, just big enough for a bed, had 3 shelves I'd put my clothes on, and a little bin I looked at. And really, quite frankly, guys like me don't go too many places. And so I was sitting on the Columbia River and drinking a beer. I was 17 years old, drinking a beer with a bunch of guys. I'd already graduated from school. And somebody said, "What are you going to do with your life?" And I said, "I have no earthly idea." And he says, "You want to go to college?" And I said, "Listen to this." And I said, "Guys like me don't go to college. No self-esteem, no money, and no way to do it." And then the next guy says, "Hey, you want to join the military?" I said, "Sure." "Okay, that's good for me." I had no idea that I was even fighting a war, so I joined the military, and that's really how I got in. So I went basic, AIT, jump school. I went to Vietnam. I was assigned to 173rd initially, and then they had a big battle in the 1st Infantry Division. I went to the 1st Infantry Division. So that's how I got into service.
Tell us about you joined with the Battle Buddy.
Well, you guys will make me cry. I came in the military. There was on that day on the Columbia River. There was 5 of us, and we all agreed to join the military. And of course, you know how that all starts. All of us say, "Yeah, we'll go." And when you really get down to it, how many show up? And there was only 2 of us showed up. Me and a guy named Prentice Boykin. And Prentice was a big guy. And we used to stay in contact in Vietnam. Back then you had, now you have Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff. You can communicate with everybody. And me and Barney I went to the 1st Infantry Division. He stayed in the 173rd. And we'd write letters back and forth. It took about 3 or 4 weeks to get a letter, and we talked about where we was going to go on R&R. And we did go on R&R. We went to Hong Kong. I think we drank about 16 fifths of liquor in 5 days. We was pretty drunk and happy. We probably spilled most of it. And the last letter I got from Barney was about extending in the military to stay in Vietnam. And about a week after that, he got his stomach blown out, and he bled to death.
God bless him. Vietnam Veterans Day, like Rolling Thunder and others, those began as protests. And this week, our staff learned a little more about it.
Well, I got to say one thing real quick. I got PTSD. I was overran, 20 wounded and 7 killed. And there's certain things, all of you guys know that, there's certain things that it's tough to get through.
Watch how I don't make eye contact at this moment. So it began as a protest. And actually, even the legislation around it was really to say that our military members who served in Vietnam were not noble warriors, and evil things occurred. And what I love about life is life goes on. People are here. Tomorrow's ceremony is to honor our Vietnam vets. So everyone who's out there, thank you for your noble service and sacrifice. And if you need to call someone who can help you, just call a friend.
Well, the really bad thing about it, it took them over 50 years to decide they want to recognize Vietnam veterans. And that's really a shame.
It is.
And I remember coming back from Vietnam, and they'd say stuff like "baby killer."
Yeah.
just all sorts of bad things that really was, if you wore your uniform, somebody would probably attack you or throw something at you. So it was just a shame.
Yeah. Well, we're glad that you weathered through that, and First Sergeant, we're glad that you weathered through that as well, because we're the benefactors of your inspiring leadership and your mentorship our whole career.
Well, what's ironic is, and this is sort of funny, for me, Vietnam was 55 years ago, 67 to 68. And in my lifetime, I've talked about Vietnam like this twice. And this is the second time.
Yeah. Well, we're glad. We've seen that in other units where you go back to say, hey, let's do an OPD on Mogadishu or something, and they go, we haven't talked about that yet.
No,
we're not ready.
No. Well, it's one thing when you go to war, and First Sergeant, a lot of all you guys know that. I think your heart turns black because you see things that, quite frankly, you don't want to see again. I remember in '68 stepping over bodies, and really, I was telling somebody a little while ago, probably the worst thing I think I've ever done. And we've all did things that we're not proud of, but each person that goes to war says one thing for sure: God, if you get me out of here, I'll never do it again. If somebody's got to get hurt, let it be somebody else. But as you get older, I think you start thinking about, those people that you had to fight, that you had to hurt, or you had to kill. I have nothing against them, but it's our job, it's our responsibility. It's about protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. And some people sort of laugh that off, but the military, they don't. They're willing to die for our freedoms.
We talked earlier as we walked through the museum about the difference between your army, our army, and the Russian army. And our non-commissioned officers coming out of Vietnam and then taking on the Great 80s. Describe the NCO Corps that you ended up being the man.
Well, I tell you, coming out of Vietnam, you all know we had regular Army and USs, and at that time you was drafting a lot of people that didn't want to necessarily come into the service. And there was a lot of discipline problems. There was a lot of guys, and there was mostly guys. I guess there was a few women in Vietnam. I think there were some nurses in Vietnam, but there's a lot of people that just didn't want to be there, and they'd stay for 2 years, and they didn't really care what went on. And so it was just tough. And the NCO Corps, really, quite frankly, the officer corps took over. They started doing something almost like the Russians do now. If you watch the Russians on TV, they hit those tanks. And what did the tanks do? They all stayed in single file and just kept going straight. They didn't disperse like they needed to disperse. So the NCO Corps was really broken. And the non-commissioned officers, to the credit of, I think it was General Westmoreland, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. General Westmoreland really put an educational system together that started that developmental process in our Army that made our Army the best Army in the world. We're not the biggest Army in the world. We're the third largest Army in the world. You got China. What's that now? General Story. Yeah, thank you. But we're not the biggest Army, but we're the third largest Army. You got China, I think it was India, or Pakistan, one of those, and then the Army. But the difference in our Army, the difference is the capabilities and the systems that we have today, the night capabilities they have, but also the non-commissioned officer corps. And when you look at the Army, 86% of the force is non-commissioned officers. Mm-hmm. And when you, not just the Army, but all services, when you look at the connection between the officers and the non-commissioned officers, it's just like that. We work as a team and we function as a team. And so that's the difference. And I was telling the general today, I was around the Russians years ago in Bosnia, and they don't have the same kind of NCO Corps that we have. They don't have the same kind of responsibilities that we have in their Army. And so for us, comparing us to them, there is no comparison in my eyes.
We're going to open the floor up for questions. This is a fireside chat opportunity to speak with one of our most famous Americans. And so if you have a question on the Vietnam side of this or the leadership side of this, or the taking care of veterans side where we'll go next. Anybody have any question you want to ask?
And I promise I won't tear up again. The only thing that tears me up every time I talk about Barney, I say, oh, that's hard to get through.
So what resonates with you out there so far? Yes.
Well, usually those guys are sort of be out by themselves, and you really, I was on a tank crew, I was on an APC, and then I got on a armored personnel carrier, and then I got on a tank crew, and I really didn't work with those guys, but you'd hear them, the things they talked about, and sometimes it was the guys that took chances, but it didn't really affect me that much. I just watched what they was doing. I listened to my sergeant. I used to call him the old guy. He was 24. So that's who I listened to. So it didn't bother me. But it was more, in my mind, it was more when I was back in the States, when I was going through training, and I was listening to the comments and the things people are doing, and the discipline things, the things that people say. They tell you don't do this, and they do it anyway. So that's why when we went to an all-volunteer Army, was probably the best decision this country ever made for our country, because now you have people that want to be there, they understand what their responsibilities are, and they're professionals at what they're doing. I was out with some snipers. You guys will appreciate this. I was out with some snipers years ago when I was a division sergeant major in the 1st Armored Division, and a young soldier said, "Sergeant Major, you want a spot for me?" I said, "Sure, I want a spot for you." And I don't remember how far this target was, but it was a long ways. And he said, "Okay." And the guy got down there, fired a round out, and I'm watching. I said, "Man, it was just a half silhouette." And I said, "Well, yeah, you hit it. You hit it right on the right side of the head." He said, "I'm Sergeant Major, I'm sorry." I said, "What's that?" He said, "It's supposed to be an inch to the left." So don't never question the capabilities of our Army. You'll hear stuff on the news and you hear comments about things that are going on. I guarantee you, our Army is the best Army in the world. When you listen to the news, you listen to what people are saying and doing. That's with a grain of salt. We got the greatest Army in the world.
Go ahead, sir.
We never had that many.
Well, the one thing that really happens in the military is it really is the biggest football team in the world. You know what I mean? It pulls everybody together. I mean, I did an interview we did a podcast about Black History Month, and somebody asked me a question. I said, "You know something? I never asked what color somebody was to my left or right. It was my brother, and they was willing to die for you. So that's important."
Yeah, you might see Alpha Company get in a fight with Bravo, but then some of the downtown boys show up, then Alpha and Bravo are fighting together against the downtown.
Well, the other thing I think too is a lot of people, you went basic, AIT, straight to Vietnam. You came back, you stayed your 1 year there, and then you came back. And within that 6-month period that you had there, that's really where you had all the discipline problems, because those guys that were USs that came in wanted to get out of the service. Yeah. Well, I think the other thing about Vietnam, or any time you go to war, it makes you grow up. I went to war at 18, and I tell people all the time, I went at 18, I come back at 55. You really understand the importance of things that you do, how important life is, how important family is, how important the people to you, like I said, to your left and right are. So it's a big adjustment. And the other thing I'll tell you too is that, I don't know about you, First Arm, but I never really wanted to go back to war. I mean, if you sent me, I'd go back, and I'd do what you asked me to do, because that's my profession. But I never told myself I'd never raise my hand again. For me, I mean, like I said, it's just a big difference. I mean, you watch a war or you watch a movie on television, and you see the smoke sort of coming up and stuff. It's not the same in war. Somebody you're talking to now is not there the next day. I was a young Spec 4, I didn't care. I had to tell you the truth. I mean, it's almost like, it's like when I got out of the Army, I used to I worked with Secretary Rumsfeld and some of the rest of those guys. And I'd read, about a week after I got the paper, I'd read something, and I'd think to myself, well, that's not necessarily true, but it's not necessarily a lie either. So your point is they did kill some, but they just stretched it out a little bit, and I had no earthly idea why. I'm not sure why anybody would say that. I would, the one fight that we really got hurt, somebody asked me one time, how many did you kill? I said, shit, I don't care. I really don't want to know. So I think for me, again, when I was in war, and war is different for everybody. Everybody looks at life differently. When I was in war, my job for me in war was to stay alive, do what you told me to do, get my job done. In fact, I'll tell you, when I got to Vietnam, I was there a month and a half. The tank that I was on, that I eventually got on, all three people, there's 4 people on the tank. 3 people got killed. The only one that lived was the driver. I got on that tank, and I'll tell this other story maybe tomorrow, but I got on that tank, I stayed on that tank about another 11 months. I was alerted to go home, and a month after I left, all 3 people got killed again. So I was right there in that window. So the one fight that we really got hurt, somebody asked me one time, how many did you kill? I said, shit, I don't care. I really don't want to know. So I think for me, again, when I was in war, and war is different for everybody. Everybody looks at life differently. When I was in war, my job for me in war was to stay alive, do what you told me to do, get my job done. In fact, I'll tell you, when I got to Vietnam, I was there a month and a half. The tank that I was on, that I eventually got on, all 3 people, there's 4 people on the tank. 3 people got killed. The only one that lived was the driver. I got on that tank, and I'll tell this other story maybe tomorrow, but I got on that tank, I stayed on that tank about another 11 months. I was alerted to go home, and a month after I left, all 3 people got killed again. So I was right there in that window. When I was the sergeant major of the Army, I was going to go back because they wanted me to go back. It was about casualties and stuff, and I really, really wanted to go back. But no, I never did. If something popped up, I had to do something else, so I couldn't go. But no, I have not went back. But I've thought about it. I'd sort of like to go back and look around, but you know, not really, not that much, I guess. I don't know.
Some people look at it as a healing process when you ever go back, and some people look at it, I'd rather let that behind.
Yeah, you know, you can tell I've had PTSD for 50 years. You know, there's certain things, like I said, that'll trigger. It's good for a speech. When you're giving a speech and you tear up a little bit, people like that. But not when you're talking to a group. But yeah, there's certain things that I don't know why. In fact, I tell people all the time. I remember stepping over bodies, and I remember I did some pretty crappy. I remember dragging a guy one time, throwing him in a ditch. But you can't see those things. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you block it out. You know, so, but it is what it is. And I think one thing for me is, I'll get through that, I'm okay. One thing for me, I think what really, when I came back from Vietnam, there wasn't no mental hygiene or mental illness council or something like that to help you out. There was nothing. You came back from Vietnam, and the people that were USs that stayed 2 years, a lot of them went out on the streets, homeless. Some of them didn't fit any no more. We'd go out in the woods and find them somewhere to live. So we really did a terrible job of taking care of Vietnam veterans. Yeah. In fact, oh, absolutely. I think because of Vietnam, because of things like Vietnam, we've improved so much more. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's just so much better now. I used to, I'll tell you the truth, I used to badmouth the VA a little bit. I would never go to the VA. No, well, yeah, but I used to say I would never use the VA. And here, probably 3 or 4 years ago, TRICARE sort of slowed down a little bit. They're not going to give you a TRICARE coverage. I live in Florida. They went, you got to find a doctor. So I said, I'll go to the VA. Best decision I ever made. They treat me real good. Everything I need, they help me out. So the VA, in my mind, is a wonderful, wonderful place. Now, just like you just said, you do have some parts or have troubles. I know that, but the vast amount of them are doing a great job. Heads up. So anyway, go back to your question. I don't know about the numbers. I was in a fight one time that, again, we was alerted to go and get a unit called, it was the 2nd Infantry. And our armor unit was alerted to go down and help them because they'd got ambushed, killed just about every American that was there. I don't know, many of us left. And I watched helicopters come in with Americans stacked too high, throw them off the helicopter. Got that.
68.
Yep, that is. Oh, God, we had to back up because there was a ditch. Couldn't get through there. Had to back up and just let them get past it. Yeah, I think I don't know why they did that. Again, I was just a young guy, I was only 18 years old, but I'm assuming they did that just to get money from the war. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, part of it, Red, is it was the first war that was on TV.
Yeah, yeah.
And then it was not a popular war, and so different narratives were being delivered by this station versus that station. There were periods of time when there was not a very popular president, and then our friend H.R. McMaster's wrote his book on dereliction of duty, saying that the senior general officers didn't do their part. In our life, my father-in-law turned in very senior generals for untrue reports. He was the first guy in his West Point class promoted to colonel, and he was the last guy in his West Point class promoted to general. God bless his soul. Yeah. So there are good people out there, but it was a mess. Yeah. And what's important for our audience and for you is to know that men of integrity and character stood up. You figured a way to be an inspiring leader in the 80s so that what happened back behind doesn't happen again. So talk to us about
the one thing, I guess you learn from your mistakes. And I learned from Vietnam about things I didn't necessarily want to do. And I learned how to treat people. I learned about leadership. I learned about leading by example. I learned about what's really important. When you talk about war, it's the basic fundamentals about being a soldier, which keep you alive on the battlefield. It's about, shooting your weapon, knowing first aid, doing the rest of the stuff. So it's just the basics. But the biggest part about that is how you treat people and how you lead people. People will follow you anywhere if they trust you, if they understand that you care about them. Exactly. But they're not going to follow you if they don't trust you. And so for my part, all I ever do, all through my military career, in fact, I used to tell people all I ever wanted to be was a good Spec 4 in the Army. I never wanted to be anything other than an E4. I really didn't. I didn't care. And I made E5 in Vietnam. I never went to a promotion board. They had somebody who was they asked somebody to drive, I was in Saigon, that was during Tet. They wanted somebody to work a convoy going from there to Xi'an and back. So I volunteered to do it. When I came back, I was 6th on the promotion list. So I said, geez, you got any more assignments like that? So it was, so it's real lucky. But I just think, again, it's maybe it sounds sort of funny, but I just think what our military does for our country, most people have no earthly idea. I was getting off the subject of Vietnam, I was in in Bosnia in '95 where they'd kneel men down and shoot them in the back head and execute them. The same thing, I was in the same area where they'd take women and slit their throat and then throw them in a ditch. You know, most people have no earthly idea about war. You know, you can read it and you can think about it and you can worry about stuff, but when I was in war, I worried about one thing: me and the people around me, and how I could just stay alive. You know,
Thanks, I need that.
I just again, I get all blabbered up because I talk about this. Again, it's only the second time, be the third time tomorrow that I've really ever talked about Vietnam, because it's brings back a lot of really sort of cruddy memories for me. I came back from Vietnam an angry kid at 18 years old. You'd set me off like that. I'm lucky I probably didn't kill somebody. I remember one time I was stomping this motorcycle. I was married, I was stomping the crap out of this motorcycle. And I stopped and I said, what am I doing? You know? And there was nobody there. So that's tough.
I was going to say, when just before we opened Sergeant Major, some character was running around upstairs, and I said to him, may I help you? And he said, no. We weren't open yet. I said, hey, you know, may I help you? And he said, no. And I said, well, do you know where you're going?
No.
And he said, yeah, I'm the architect. And I said, oh, gosh, well, that'll be a great opportunity, you know, for me to gain a further understanding. I said, so when you built this circular building, was it like a wedding ring?
Yeah.
He said, no, circular buildings are just really tough, so I wanted to try that. And I said, well, when you built these big arches, was that like Under Armour or Super Strength? Yeah. He said, no, arches are even harder than circulars. Yeah. I said, Brad, you got to throw me a bone. You know, what were you trying to create? And he said, ethical space. Yeah. And so having you here, second time you've opened your heart to describe these things, that's what this museum's about. Yeah. To be that gathering place, you know, honor, to connect, you know, America to veterans and to the veteran experience, and veterans back to America, and then inspire everyone to service bigger, right?
I think the problem though is you got a lot of veterans is not necessarily like me, but you got a lot of guys that get out there, and gals now, that get out there by themselves, and there's nobody for them to reach out to. You know, if you got a problem or an issue, and in fact, I was telling somebody a few minutes ago, I had a good friend of mine here about 6 or 7 months ago that let his dog out. His wife went somewhere and walked down the woods and killed himself. You know, so tough business. Everybody, you, me, and everybody that's been to war comes back with scars. You know, you may not be able to see them, but you got them.
For sure.
I think it's what you've seen, and everybody sees things differently, and everybody works in things differently. I'm sitting there thinking about, you know, I'm talking about some negative stuff out of Vietnam, but there were some positive things out of Vietnam. I mean, I remember one time there was my tank commander was using the train, and a sniper started shooting at him, and I'd seen his little butt run across the field, and that sniper, I thought that was pretty funny. But he never shot him, but I thought it was funny. So.
Describe your activities now, helping veterans out, the different foundations, and where that touches you deep inside.
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, when I got out of the service, I really wanted to continue to serve, you know, in some way. Everybody gets out and you sort of struggle, trying to figure out what you want to do. And so I got out, well, in 2002, I took what they call Sergeant Major of the Army's Hope and Freedom Tour to Iraq and Afghanistan. So I took singers and let them sing for the troops during Christmas and stuff. And I really liked it. And I got to be pretty good friends with a friend of mine named Ted Hacker. He managed the Oak Ridge Boys and a bunch of different artists down in Nashville. And again, we got to be pretty good friends. And I called him up after about 2 weeks out of the service. I said, look, I don't have any money. I'm not sure if this is a good idea, but let's do some concerts. And he said, I'm in. I said, okay, let's do it. So we raised, I don't know, $30,000 or $40,000. You know, if you do a show nowadays, it costs you anywhere from, you know, about $200,000 to $1 million. So we started doing concerts, and we did concerts for 10 years. And we were able to give away about $12 or $13 million back to veterans. And then After that, we started doing hiring events. So now we do 4 to 5 hiring events a year, and we put veterans to work, and so veterans and family members to work. And so when COVID hit, I said, geez, we got to do something else. We got to find a way to connect with veterans as much as we can. So I've been talking about doing a podcast for years. Now, I don't know if anybody ever listens to me or not, but I said, let's do a podcast. What a great idea. I said, well, who's going to host it? You are. I said, so we started a podcast called Your Next Mission, and it's the number 1 military podcast in the country according to FeedSpot. So, yeah. And I'm the host, and we bring on, which I think I do a pretty good job, as long as I don't cry or nothing. But I try to, we have the trade-out commander coming on, ForceCon commander. We did a show for 9/11 up at the Memorial, Air Force Memorial. We'll do a live show out on the USS Midway. It's the month of the child. We'll do a show out there. We're going to do a live show at Fort Benning. So I try to do 1 live show and 3 recorded shows a month. And the whole purpose of this is to, 1 is help veterans, and 2 is educate our country about what veterans do. And so it's really going pretty good. So I'm excited. But again, now I think we've given away, it's not a whole lot. There's just 2 or 3 of us that are, well, probably now in this podcast, there's probably 8 of us, but there's 2 or 3 of us that are really focused on giving a whole lot of money back. So we've given away about $14 million now. And I also, I'm an owner of my own company. All the guys in my company are all retirees, right? All sergeant majors. And so I have 8 employees. So I have that company, and then I have another company where all the senior enlisted guys from all the services, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, all formed a team called Pinnacle 5. And we do national consulting for a bunch of different companies. In fact, I don't know, you guys probably never seen it, but I have a little ad on Fox TV now that I'm doing some stuff on Fox. So I'm just out there trying to make money. No, I think it's important for us to tell our story. You know, it's like I said, it's hard to get through the story, but it's important to tell people the kind of sacrifices our veterans make for all of us. And then the last thing I did, I even wrote a book. I wrote a book called Soldier for Life. It's got 5 stars on Amazon, so it can't be too bad. But in the prologue, it talks about the first order I ever refused in the Army. I can't tell you the story because you won't buy the book.
We got to read it.
No, I'll tell you. No, Article 15. No, well, it's really funny. I never received an Article 15. I probably should have. But they always said, Tilley, if you do it again, I'll give you an Article 15.
One more chance.
I'll give you one more chance. Yeah.
Hey, talk about Operation Rising Star and sparkle in the eye of all those soldiers that you touched.
Well, see, I can't say no. That's my problem. I love life. I believe in God. I'm going to tell you one more story too. I won't tell tomorrow, but I'll tell you in a minute. The Operation Rising Star was a singing competition like American Idol. And I was a judge. I was a judge on there for 10 years. Now, I love music, but what qualifications do I have? Absolutely nothing, right? So I would get on there and I'd say, you really sound good, or everything's good, or I'm digging you or something. But what I talked about to those guys was, how to make contact with people, how to look them in the eye, how to talk to people, how to show your emotions. So I had a great time. And again, it ran for about 10 years, and then they got rid of it and broke my heart. But that's life. You got to
After I left.
After you left, that's right. After you left.
Yeah, for sure. It was awesome. So if someone wanted to help you, what .org should they go to?
You can just go to the American Freedom Foundation. Just Google that, American Freedom Foundation. And now I'll tell you, if do you have YouTube? If you got YouTube, I'm going to give you something. Like I said, I did 38 shows last year. I'll do 48 this year. If you'll go to YouTube and just click on it and Google Your Next Mission and let it come up, there'll be a star, subscribe, and you can listen to our shows. It doesn't cost you a thing. Coming up, we have, like I said, the trade-out commanders coming on there. We even had the chaplain for the Senate came on there and talked. So we have a lot of different people. And we have you ever heard of the Cohen Clinic that talks about, we
Sure.
have the Cohen
Stephen
Clinic come on
Cohen
and talk about mental illness for our veterans and families. So it's a way, again, giving back to our veterans. Can I tell one story?
Okay.
I'm a long-winded there. Now, if you get me through the tears, I'm okay. But I tell people all the time, I believe in life, I believe in God. And I had a Bible when I was in Vietnam. And this is the weirdest thing in the world. Sometimes I'm even amazed. I'm not sure I've even seen this. But everybody, when they go to war, they get that small Bible. Remember that? They give you a Bible you put in your pocket. And I had that Bible about a month. And I got to admit now, I do believe in God. There's no question in my mind about that. And I got to Vietnam, and I was on the APC, and then I got on the tank. And when I got on the tank, I got a 50 caliber box to put all my personal items in. And I opened up that Bible, and there was a blood print on that Bible. Think about that. Where did that come from? It's the weirdest thing in the world. And I thought, man, this has got to be a mark or something. Somebody's helped me out. And so I kept that Bible the whole year I was in Vietnam. I kept that Bible. And again, I told you about Barney got killed. And when they alerted me to go and escort Barney's remains back, I went out and you don't have much time. I think I had a couple hours before I left because it's really weird. You're out of there. And I ran up and I got that 50 caliber box. I pulled everything out and the Bible's gone. Huh. Now think about that. That Bible's no longer with me. So was that my lucky Bible for a year? Now everybody got killed before I got on that tank, and they all got killed after I got on that tank, or after I got on the tank. So it's strange about life. I believe in yourself, believe in God, believe in everything that you do every day. And the other thing I think is make this a better place for each person every day. Do something for somebody. Help them all out. Do something. But just don't waste air, Try to make it a better place for all of us. So anyway, I got a couple more, but I'll share that one with you.
That's all right. Time's on our side.
Okay.
We, the 20-Year War, page 18 and page 19 is the Jack Tilley story.
Yeah.
And you talk about Gloria in there. Am I right?
Yeah. You're going to make me cry again. I've been married a long time. Been married 52 years. And if I would look back on my life, and if there's things I wish I did just a little bit different, I didn't watch my kids grow up. I think I was always gone. I was always deployed. I was always doing something. And they went from 1 to 30. Tough. How do you pay your spouse back for those kind of sacrifices? There is nothing that you can do. Nothing. And so what I've told my wife is that I'll buy you anything you want. I'll get you anything you want. Right? If you want a new, and really, I'm going to tell you, not bragging, like I said, I don't have a bill. I own a couple of companies. Life has been good for me. God bless this great country. You can complain all you want, but I feel pretty good about it. But I'm going to pay her back for the rest of my life, and that's what a lot of spouses. Oh my God, the sacrifices they make for all of us. Now, I got another story for you. I'm going to tell you another story. All right, I'll probably. You guys are making me talk. I'm going to try not to cry. All right, so I have an older boy that had pneumococcus meningitis. I don't know if you know what that is. He was 15 months old. He got pneumococcus meningitis, left him temporarily blind, 15 to 20 seizures a day. Encephalitis is a coat and a pus over your brain. He got a lumbar shunt put in his spine. And really, quite frankly, I thought he'd always die early. I never thought he'd live. And so we brought him over. Now remember, he can't hear and he can't see, right? And I think he's about 22 months or something like that. So I'd put him on a little motorcycle, and he'd put his ear to so I knew he could feel it, the vibration. But I was always worried about him. I said, how long is he gonna make it? And so I just said, I'm just gonna soldier on. I'm gonna do what I have to do. So I just kept doing those things, kept doing the kind of things that are right for our country. See, I believe in life. I believe in God. I believe in our country. And so Brian gets older. He learns how to talk. He learns how to talk through sign language, right? That's how he learned how to talk. But backing up a little bit, we're up at Fort Lewis, Washington there. And my wife called me. She says, Jack, you got to come home. I said, well, at the time now, Brian's on, he's having 15 to 20 seizures a day, and he's on like 3 different kinds of medication. And I said, okay, I'm coming home. So I was up at Yakima Fire and started shooting tanks, and I come back, and of course I went to the, Madigan Hospital, I think it is up there. Yeah. I went to Madigan, and I went up to the doc and said, Doc, tell me what's wrong. Tell me, what's going to happen? And he says, I don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't? We don't know what's wrong with him. Now, at the time, he's on 15 or three kinds of different medications to try to control the seizures, and he has 15 to 20 seizures a day. And so, again, here's another tough one. So I went in this small annex, and I got down on my hands and knees, and I said, God, either let him live or let him die. Think about that for a second. Either let him live or let him die. It's about life. It's about God. It's about the things that we do each and every day. It's not fair. It's not fair to anybody to have to suffer like that. And so the next day, there was nothing wrong with him. Think about that. The seizure stopped. Now you can tell me whatever you want to tell me, but it is about believing.
That's a good one. All right, we'll take about a half hour off here and return in just a moment.
Well, I mean, isn't it crazy how stuff like that happens? I mean, I've seen, I've seen so many, all of us have seen things that's happened. And you think to yourself, and I'm not the most religious person in the world, but I mean, I can just tell you what I've seen and what's happened around me, And just like in war, somebody goes left and somebody goes right. And I did a show one time for 9/11. And it was an hour and a half show. You can get it on YouTube, but it's an hour and a half show. But the second session was 2 people that actually was trapped in the Pentagon. And they told me they couldn't see their hand in front of their face. Mm-hmm. And they talk about crawling down this corridor, not knowing where the end was. And people went left and people went right. The ones that went right may not have lived, and the ones that went left did. So,
I heard you say this before.
how does those kind of things happen? Just hard to figure out anyway. So,
if you were looking in the camera and talking to veterans, which you are, what advice would you give to veterans they're obviously left service and they're on their way? What do you expect from them?
Well, I think the biggest thing about veterans in the leader service is talk to another veteran. Make sure you stay connected, because there's a lot of people like me that are out there that want to help you with anything that we can. Help each other out. Talk to a veteran, help a family member out, and don't think that you're alone. If you got problems, geez, call me. I'm easy. I'll give you my number, 813-541-4512. Give me a call. Give me a shout if you want to talk to somebody, because I'm just not saying it. I believe in it. I believe in every service member. You don't have to be an Army guy. I wish you was, but if you're not, that's okay. We're all veterans together. We're going to stay together. So God bless each and every one of you for what you do and what you continue to do. Crazy.
being more than a museum, we're running veteran concierge. We're building it so we can help with employment. So contact us, contact Sergeant Major in terms of employment. If you're employers out there, business owners, and you want the best talent management possible, hire a veteran. If you
Absolutely.
need help, see us. When a veteran joins your team, it gets better that day. And they can't help themselves. They're often like a Labrador with a tennis ball. And they just got to organize things and make things happen. We're running a wellness and resiliency here now. We began with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Next comes yoga. But get veterans connected with each other. Sign up for our 5K run, virtual or live, and you'll get a shirt that says, "I'll always remember." We run leader certification through Ohio State University. So reach out to us, give us your ideas on how we can even more help veterans around the country, and we will all together. We win together. If you know someone who needs a phone call, I'm tasking you and asking you, call someone and say, "I was just thinking about you as I came out of this." Now, about 30,000 or greater will see this presentation in the next couple of weeks. And then sooner or later, they'll see me on your podcast. And you get to ask the questions, and I get to tell the stories.
There you go.
But, Sergeant Major, I'll give you a chance for a closeout.
No,
here.
I tell you, I just appreciate for what you guys do, and thanks a lot for inviting me here. And you really helped me open up some wounds that I didn't know was there, I guess. But I just really appreciate it. And thank you guys for what you do, and thanks a lot for being here today. And God bless each and every one of you.
They say that kind of whenever a soldier does a good job, he gets a coin from some general. So
And you don't have one.
I got one there somewhere. I can lose things in my pocket faster than anyone. All right, Sergeant Major.
Hey, God
Great
bless.
job.
Hey, thank you so much. Appreciate it. I'm sorry about getting jumped up. That's tough. Thank you, guys.
No, it's great.
Yeah.